Yesterday, there was obviously a reported attack on a prominent Russian individual that has been alleged and associated to a number of death squads and quasi-military, paramilitary operations in Ukraine, Armen Sarkisyan, who was killed in his exclusive apartment block in the center of Moscow. Initially, obviously, information was leading to how he was attacked, but inevitably it was a very well planned, well thought out, and extremely well executed attack. And as information is now emerging, it would appear that the attack was delivered by a suicide bomber. And from the forensics that have been initially carried out, they've established that the individual has some Armenian nationality associated to them, which draws out some very interesting connotations. One of the greatest concerns is that this very prestigious, very luxurious apartment building, which is made up of four separate buildings, which were only recently developed and were completed in 2014, is that this luxury development didn't have sufficient security to be able to process or to audit individuals that are entering this location. Now, more often than not, and I've seen this in various parts of the world, when you're in the center of a major metropolis, one can become relaxed in just perceiving that the threats that could be presented would be from low-level criminality and not necessarily from a terrorism dynamic, unless there have been instances or regular instances, as there are in central London, for example, of a terrorist attack potentially targeting a key location. But even as a key location, one has to consider that within these luxury blocks, there will be friends of Putin, there will be other enemies of the Ukraine, or even in perhaps this instance, enemies of the Armenian nation in terms of the terrorist groups that are operating out of there that would be perceived as a viable target, and the security in the surroundings has evidently failed. Or, more to the point, the security advisors for Sarkisyan did not necessarily consider what resilience it had against a potential terrorist attack. We've now seen two terrorist attacks which have occurred within only the matter of a few months, one being an electric scooter and one being a suicide bomber, as is believed, which says that the center of Moscow is not impervious to these kinds of risks or these kinds of assassinations. And there will no doubt be other prominent Russians connected to Putin or connected to various perhaps criminal or illicit actions, as is alleged Sarkisyan was involved in, that should be now reviewing their security and considering whether the safe haven of the center of Moscow in a luxurious development that should have pretty robust security need to review whether that is in fact the safe haven they can count on. As the two individuals that have been targeted in these two separate assassination attacks, albeit by what we believe to be two separate groups, Putin will now be putting his security services on alert, certainly even within the heart of Moscow, as to what security is in place to protect not only those that are allies to him, but also in detecting who is coming into the city, who is operating within the city, and undertaking what we would call surveillance detection, i.e., determining how and who is operating in the city that could mean harm to prominent individuals. Now, these measures of counter-surveillance are essential because certainly in both instances, these two assassinations, what is quite clear is that some extended period of reconnaissance and advanced surveillance was undertaken to determine the pattern of life, the schedule of these individuals, which is not uncommon when it comes to assassinations. And what we have in both instances is the first individual, member of the Russian military, leaving his property, the scooter being outside and being able to be detonated, no doubt within line of sight of the assassin or attack party. And in this second most recent incident, an individual that supposedly went into the lobby as Sarkisyan, his target, was leaving the elevator and detonated himself. Now, the time windows, certainly in the second instance, would have been very limited. And the longer that they had stayed within that area, the greater the chances of capture or detection. So this was planned down to the minute as to when they anticipated he was to leave and the time that the suicide bomber, as we believe, activated his plan.